Welcome to Too Fond of Books. My name is Janelle, and this is my week 3 wrap-up for Jane Austen July. I have been loving Jane Austen July. I've been reading so many great books, so much great material, and I can't wait to tell you about what I've been reading this week. And I also have a very fun activity coming up a little later in this video, so stay tuned. I'm going to try some Regency era something. It's a surprise. Okay, so I finished Murder at Mansfield Park by Lynn Shepherd, and I loved it. I loved it. I wasn't exactly sure if I was going to enjoy it and what I would think about it, but I loved it. And the funny thing is when I put it on Goodreads, I apparently read this book in 2017, but I have zero recollection of it, and I don't know what that means. But having just read Mansfield Park, it was very entertaining to read this book because Lynn Shepherd has taken the story of Mansfield Park and turned it on its head, and it is really fun. It was really well written. She stayed true to the style of Jane Austen, using the words that Jane Austen would use, but she very much wrote her own story. On the back here it says that Lynn Shepherd has a doctorate in English literature from Oxford University, and I believe an obvious love of Jane Austen. So this one was really fun. In this book, she made Fanny Price an heiress instead of the poor relation, which was fascinating. So Fanny Price still goes to live with Sir Thomas and Lady Bertram when she's a child, but she is rich. She's an heiress, and that changes everything. Mrs. Norris kowtows to her, and it's actually Julia, the person in the family, who Miss Norris treats poorly, which is really interesting. There are a lot of the same beats in the story in this book, and a lot of the same things that happen in this book. Mrs. Norris is essentially the same character. She's awful. She's still conniving and awful and out to get, what the best that she can. In this story, however, Edmund is her stepson, which is fascinating, and Fanny Price ends up getting murdered. And it is so interesting. We tend to follow Mary Crawford in this book as the main character, and a thief taker is invited to come from London to investigate what happened to Fanny Price. And I don't want to give any spoilers, but my goodness, did I ever really enjoy this book. And then to one that I did not enjoy at all, and that is Possibilities by Debra White-Smith. If I wasn't reading this for Jane Austen July, I would have 100% DNF'd this book. It was terrible. This is a contemporary retelling of Persuasion, and it has just gone to prove to me that it is very difficult to write a contemporary retelling of Jane Austen in any way that makes sense. Nothing about this story worked. So she has it set in Georgia, and the main character, Allie Elton, is the daughter of the family. They are rich, and all of it's the same, and that's the problem. Anytime you try to do a contemporary retelling of a Jane Austen book and keep the same beats and the same characters and the same plot points, it does not work, because it just does not work in our current culture. So the characters in this book were awful people, and it just didn't work, and I did not like it at all. Okay, and then I mentioned last time that I read the fragment The Watsons by Jane Austen, and then I completed the story that Joan Aiken wrote, completing that fragment. And I wasn't really a fan of this either. I did not really like where she took the story. She brought in new characters and a new hero and just went in a completely different direction to how we know that Jane Austen was going to take the story. And I just didn't really like it. yeah, I just didn't really like where she went with this story. And also there was a couple of things that I felt like she was kind of cheating, because there wasn't really any other way for her to get this information to her main character, but she had two different single men write letters to our main character, to Emma Watson, who is a single woman. And they just didn't do that. Like, you did not correspond with someone unless you were engaged to them. And so I did not like that. I marked the page here because she actually wrote out the letters. And I mean, this is information that the character needed to have, but I feel like Joan Aiken should have found another way to get it to her, because that was cheating, because they would not have written her a letter. Okay, and then I also decided to kind of put down for now the Jane Austen Marriage Manual by Helen Amy. I've read about 65 pages in here, and I've decided that's good enough. This was the book that I said that about 20 pages was the author's own information at the beginning, and then the rest of the book is reprints of contemporary literature at the time that was written about courtship and marriage. And the parts that I have read have all been written to women, but I'm not entirely sure if that's consistent throughout the book. But I feel like I've read enough of it for now, and I'm just going to take this one back to the library. All right, and so one last book that I finished, and this is the Jane Austen Handbook by Margaret C. Sullivan. Proper Life Skills from Regency, England. And this one was just really fun. A lot of information about etiquette and protocol at the time, how to become an accomplished lady, how to identify the quality, how to write a letter, how to get around, how to plan a dinner party, how to treat the sick, how to pay a morning call. It was just really, really entertaining. And there was a couple of things in here that I wanted to share with you. So one here, she talks about the modern money equivalents. While Jane Austen is precise as to the amounts of her characters' personal fortunes, it can be difficult to understand the true value of these fortunes from a distance of 2 centuries. Some experts suggest simply multiplying the amount by 50, thus Mr. Darcy's £10,000 a year becomes £500,000, or close to $1 million. Economist J. Bradford DeLong of the University of California, Berkeley, suggests that straight multiplication does not give the whole story, and that one must also take into consideration the relative buying power of the amount at that time and place. In those days, goods were expensive and labor cheap, and while a horse might cost as much as £100, a maidservant's wages for an entire year were less than £10 plus her room and board. DeLong's calculations place the modern equivalent of Mr. Darcy's income at $6 million per year. I'd say he's kind of wealthy. Yeah. All right. The other interesting thing was when she was talking about eloping to Gretna Green, and this is a little bit called Marriage over the Anvil. In 1753, England established a marriage act that laid out strict rules. Each party must be 21 years old or have the consent of their parents. The marriage banns must have been published over several weeks in each party's parish or a special license obtained from Doctors' Commons, and the wedding must take place in a church before noon with the event noted in the parish records. Marriages contracted in England under any other circumstances were subject to annulment. The point of the act was to throw difficulties in the way of fortune hunters trying to sweep an heiress into an ill-considered marriage. Obtaining a special license was not difficult, but it was expensive, and many couples in a hurry simply ran away to Scotland. Scotland's marriage laws were much like England's had been prior to the establishment of the Marriage Act, allowing boys of 14 and girls of 12 to marry without parental consent or church interference. The parties needed only to declare themselves husband and wife before witnesses. Because marriages legally contracted in Scotland were legally binding in England, Scottish villages close to the border established a cottage industry in providing the means for couples to quickly marry. The best known of these villages was Gretna Green, located just a mile from the Scottish border. Many weddings were held in the romantic confines of the blacksmith's shop, as he was the tradesman of most importance in the town. The more romantic opined that the blacksmith's art, melding different metals together into a new whole, is a metaphor for marriage. Such ceremonies were often referred to as marriage over the anvil, with professional witnesses hired for the occasion. The tradition continues, and the wedding industry is still thriving in Gretna Green in the 21st century. So yeah, I thought that was really interesting. I mean, I was very familiar with that phrase with, you know, they're going to Gretna Green, and so it was interesting to learn more about that. So here is the surprise activity. There is this section here called How to Write a Letter. And since we have a seal and sealing wax, I thought it would be fun to attempt to write my own Regency era style letter. Now, the recipient of a letter must pay for its postage based on the weight of the letter and how far it traveled. So it is rude to expect someone to pay for extra pages, so confine yourself to 1 sheet or 2 at the most. And so this is why they wrote letters the way they did. So I wrote a letter. I just copied actually the text from Mansfield Park to do this. So you wrote a letter, the date and location at the top, and then I just started writing. So you write a letter as normal, as you can see. But then you turn it upside down and you continue writing in between the lines, upside down in between the lines. So it is like nearly impossible. And then you flip it over and you continue writing across. And I actually only wrote a couple of lines across because I was convinced that I was doing it wrong, but then Aaron told me that no, that's right. But can you imagine if I had kept going, how on earth do you actually read this letter? It's crazy. Okay, but let us move on to the folding of the letter. Okay, so the book says then that you fold it into the middle like this. I'm going to put it down to actually press down the folds. All right, so I've folded it like that. And then you do a triple fold from the top down. What we're essentially trying to accomplish here is our own, basically your own envelope. So I've folded it again. And then what I would do probably is tuck it a bit. All right, so, and I'm not doing it quite exactly right, but so you can see how then I'm tucking one into there and I've made it like a little packet. Okay, and so now I am going to put the seal on it. So I am going to require a candle. All right. So we're going to light the candle, and then I will show you my seal. So we picked this up a number of years ago and I can't even remember where. So there it is. There's our seal, and it's a fancy stylized H for hoose. And we got the wax as well. Okay, so I'm going to make the wax melty. I'll do a little bit more. And I'm gonna need to do a little bit more. I should have figured out how to do this in front of the camera so that you guys can see what I'm doing here. All right, I'm gonna leave the candle down here at this point and just try and show you. I'm probably not doing this right. I should have reminded myself how to do the wax, but okay. So there we go. We've got ourselves a nice little glob of wax there. And I am going to take our seal and like that. I did it! That is my Regency era how to write a letter. So there you go. That was pretty fun. I'm going to blow out this candle. Safety first, right? And put away our fancy, fancy seal. All right, so there you have it. There's my letter. Okay, I have a couple books on the go for the final week of Jane Austen July. I'm continuing to read The Mysteries of Udolpho by Radcliffe. And as you can see, I haven't made a huge amount of progress in this. I know I'm not going to finish this month. I'm just going to take it as a slow read, and I'll take as long as I need to read this slow and steady and enjoy this Gothic, classic Gothic story. I've also started North by Northanger by Carrie, Bebris, which is the third in the Mr. and Mrs. Darcy mystery series. And in this series, it's also called Or the Shades of Pemberley. So in this book in the series, Elizabeth and Darcy find a letter that was written by Darcy's mother. And it was written to whoever was going to be Mrs. Darcy, whoever married her son. And she mentions in the letter, she is writing it just before she gives birth to Georgiana, and we all know that she died after that, giving birth to Georgiana. And so she mentions in the letter some sort of object, some sort of like family heirloom, something that she had been trying to find, and that she was suggesting that the new Mrs. Darcy might want to find. So all of that was very intriguing. And then I haven't got to the part yet. I've just gotten to the part where Frederick Tilney has written a letter to Mr. Darcy inviting him to Northanger Abbey, and I can't remember exactly why he wanted him to come. Oh, here's the letter. So they are both currently in Bath, and that's why he's writing to him. He knows that he's there. He said his late mother, Mrs. Victor Tilney, enjoyed a friendship of one Lady Anne Darcy, whom I believe to be your mother. He says, although she has passed away, I would take great pleasure in meeting her son. And he needs to leave Bath, so he is inviting them to come to Northanger Abbey. And he doesn't really give any other information than that. And so I'm still kind of near the beginning of this, but I really do enjoy this series. I have also started Speaking of Jane Austen by Sheila Kaye-Smith and J.B. Stern. This was written in 1944, I believe. And it appears that, it's possibly a series of essays, and that's how the book's put together. According to the table of contents, and this is the chapter I'm on, introducing Sheila Kaye-Smith to Jane Austen. And I'm really enjoying that chapter so far. It's really interesting learning about her introduction to Jane Austen. Chapter 2, introducing J.B. Stern to Jane Austen. Chapter 3, all the new poems and states of the nation. And then there's brackets by which one of them wrote each chapter. On a certain enchanting quality, as careless as such subjects as most people, on such subjects as most people, the Mansfield Park Quartet, the sweets of housekeeping in a country village, her mind improved. So it seems to me that it's maybe a series of essays. I guess I'll find out. And then I've also started Unmarriageable by Soniah Kamal, which is Pride and Prejudice in modern day Pakistan. And I'm actually only 10 pages into this one, but I'm really enjoying it so far, and I'm really interested to see what's going to happen with again. So this is again a modern day retelling. However, I think that because of where it is and the culture of that country, that this is a retelling that could work. So I'm really hopeful for this one. So that's been my week 3 of Jane Austen July. Have you read any of these books? I would love to talk with you about them in the comment section down below. Also, what do you think of my letter? Not bad, right? Whether or not the recipient can actually read this letter is another question. But I will see you for another video soon. Bye.